Okay, very good morning to you once again from the University of Cape Coast. I want to warmly welcome you and apologize for the delay. Today we are going to be looking at the conventions of usage. A convention is something that is established. So any topic we talk about here has implication for rules that exist in the language that we are using. Unit 3, conventions of usage. I'm very sure that you are ready, very equipped and poised for action. So by the end of this unit 1, you should be able to interpret and then write appropriate punctuation marks. You should be able to identify the appropriate prepositions, punctuations, and then use them correctly. And then you should be able to choose appropriate pronouns to match the right nouns. You should also be able to use appropriate spellings by the end of the unit. This is how the whole interaction is going to proceed. Session 1 will pay attention to some punctuation marks. We continue in session 2, still on punctuation marks. 3, punctuation marks. When we get to session 4, we'll be looking at the use of prepositions. Then in session 5, we look at our pronouns. And then in session 6, we pay attention to some spelling and spelling rules. Good. So in the first session, by the time it is done, we expect that you will be able to identify the 2 uses of the apostrophe as a punctuation mark and then use the apostrophe appropriately. You should be able also to state the 3 uses of the brackets and use brackets appropriately. Then you should be able to state the 3 uses of the colon and use the colon correctly. Good. So I believe we can proceed with our first session. In our first session, we are looking at the apostrophe. We are looking at the uses and instances of the uses of the apostrophe as a punctuation mark. But what is an apostrophe? Generally, the apostrophe is used to show possession in nouns. And it is also used to show possession in indefinite pronouns. By possession, we mean ownership, to show that one noun owns another noun. Okay? So the first instance, now, you have the boy's book. Boy is a noun. Book is a noun. Who owes or owns who? The boy owns the book. So if you want to make this clear, if you want to communicate this ownership meaning, you can employ or use the apostrophe. So boy, apostrophe S is boy's book. The teacher's notebooks. Teacher apostrophe S. Then you can also use it for singular nouns ending in S. There are some nouns that end themselves in S already. What do we do here? For instance, you have princess. Princess is a noun that ends in S. How do we mark apostrophe or ownership on it? The convention says you introduce the apostrophe and then bring your S. So princess's love. Okay? That is for a noun that is singular, like Jesus, Moses, Jesus's name, in Jesus's name. You write the full name, you bring your apostrophe, and then your S. But there is another instance where the noun is already plural, and if it is plural, for regular cases, it will end in S. So how do we write that also? Okay, so a noun like girls. Girls is plural and ends in S. What do we do? Because we know that the apostrophe, marking the apostrophe involves an apostrophe mark and then S. So for this one, it is girls, apostrophe. Okay, because it is a plural noun. Girls, apostrophe. So girls' skirts, okay, boys' shoes, okay. These are some examples you can have. Then we can also have nouns that are plural, but they are irregular. Nouns like child, children, okay. So you can have children's park, men's coats, women's fellowship. Okay, then you can have indefinite pronouns. How do we mark ownership or apostrophe on the indefinite pronouns? Indefinite pronouns such as somebody, nobody, someone are marked. You write the indefinite pronoun, you bring your apostrophe sign, and then your S. So somebody's guess, that is somebody's guess. That is nobody's business or nobody's answers. Someone's concern or someone's purse. Okay? I believe you can give some examples. Sure, you can. So try them. Give some examples and then let's see. Don't repeat any nouns we have mentioned. Good. Yes. So that is for nouns marking possession. Okay, we have had 5 instances of the first use of the apostrophe. Secondly, we can use the apostrophe in time modifiers. Okay? Sometimes we say that it is time ownership, a day's visit and all of that. So we modify the time, okay? So for example, we can have a week's stay, a week's stay. You can have a day's visit, or a year's study leave, okay? So what we are doing here is saying that the study leave lasts for a year, or the visit lasts for a day, 10 hours lecture, okay, a 10 hours lecture. Now you can see that in the examples, the first nouns modify the second noun, okay. So weeks modify stay, days modify visit, years modify study or study leave. In the second noun, there is now modification, as we have seen, and we must note that the apostrophe is omitted in adjective noun combinations. Adjective noun combinations that are names of organizations or of places. For example, students' union. Students is a noun. Union is also a noun. okay, Students Union, Ghana Registered Nurses Association, Accra Girls Secondary School, Boys Brigade. Now what we are saying is that these nouns are not showing possessions, so you don't need to bring apostrophe, okay? It is Nurses Association, Association of Nurses, okay? Good. So we have to remember that in forming possessive of proper nouns, for instance, that end in S already, you have the opportunity to choose, for instance, King James. See, James ends in S already. King James's Bible, Moses's Law, or King James's Bible. In this case, you have the apostrophe and then the S. In the first instance, it is only the apostrophe, but it is still pronounced the same way as when the apostrophe and the S are restored. So King James's Bible, King James's Bible, Moses's Law, Moses's Law, okay? Either form is acceptable, though the first option, which is the apostrophe without the S, is quite common. You must also remember again that the possessive of inanimate nouns is expressed not with the S, or we do not express the possessives of inanimate nouns with the S. Rather, we have to use the of construction, the of phrase construction. So instead of saying the table's leg, we say the leg of the table, the size of the car. Why are we using of constructions now instead of the apostrophe marker? The reason is that these nouns are inanimate. They are not living things, okay? Of course, sometimes you can have company, the company's rules. Why don't we say the rules of the company? We can say the rules of the company or the company's rules, but the understanding is that company, for instance, is made up of human beings, okay? And it is seen as an entity, okay? So you can also have the color of her eyes, not her eyes color or her eyes' color, okay? Yeah. While this is the general rule, there are a few inanimate nouns that regularly take the possessive form. We have said that as part of an exception, some inanimate nouns or inanimate nouns do not take the apostrophe S marking. But remember that these are conventions, and every rule you have in the language, there are exceptions. And it is very important that we get to know the rules, and very, 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 very important that we get to know the exceptions also. So for an exception, we say university, an inanimate noun like university can take the apostrophe and the S. So the university's doors, university's gate, the bank's objective, her heart's desire, the nation's goals, Ghana's pride, etc. So these must be counted as exceptions to the rule that we stated earlier, that inanimate nouns do not take the apostrophe S marking. Rather, they take the of phrase constructions. Often, the S that forms, the S form occurs. I mean, the apostrophe plus S form occur with inanimate nouns that name a country. Okay, so Ghana's independence. Sometimes it is also a product. Okay, coffee's flavor. If the inanimate noun is a product, you can comfortably restore your apostrophe sign and the S. So coffee's flavor. If it is an organization, company, or an establishment, an institution, you can also comfortably use your apostrophe plus the S. So the UN's peacekeepers. Sometimes it can be a unit of time, as we have already seen in previous examples. This is a day's journey. Don't pack all your stuff. It's a day's journey. Then you can also have the apostrophe plus S restored when the inanimate noun is seen as a personified entity. We see it as a human, okay? So Harmattan's dry wind, beauty's perfection. But remember also that poets have license, so they may not care whether it is inanimate or animate. They can decide to restore the apostrophe and then the S. We are going to the third use of the apostrophe marker. Okay? We use it to form the plurals of letters, numbers, symbols, and words, as in she had 3 A's, 2 80s, or no ifs, late 1960s, or late 1960s without the apostrophe. Then we can also say cross your T's. We're not talking about one T, T's. MPs, you are talking about a lot of member of parliaments. The common, the widely acceptable for plurals is, for instance, MPs without the apostrophe. The understanding is that these don't show possession. They only talk about numbers. Okay? So if you look at 1960 and the 1960s, okay, the first one has the apostrophe, the second one doesn't have it. The second one is a widely acceptable usage. The same thing can happen when it is 3 A's. So I scored 3 A's. But the reason sometimes we put the apostrophe there is to make it different. For instance, for A's, if you write it without the apostrophe, somebody will read it as us. Okay, good. So I believe you can now give us some 5 examples to illustrate each of the 3 major uses of the apostrophe. First, we mentioned earlier that we use the apostrophe to mark possession in nouns. We also talked about it being used as marking time units, okay? Then we are saying that we can also use it to form the plurals of letters, numbers, symbols, and words. And I want to find out if you can give us some 5 examples for each of the uses we have mentioned. So we can move on to our next punctuation mark, and that is the brackets or parentheses. Okay, this is also punctuation mark. These are used to separate comments, okay, extra information or an afterthought from the rest of the sentence. For example, the evils that men do, into brackets, so Shakespeare reminds us, bracket close, live after them. In this use, we decided to give you what Shakespeare said, but in afterthought, we thought it wise to show you that it is Shakespeare who said it or reminded us. So the evils that men do, quotation bracket opens, so Shakespeare reminds us, bracket closes, live after them. Another example, Mary said she would never, or she had never had a wink for months. There is something in bracket there. And what is in bracket gives us some extra information, okay, or our own thoughts, and we want to separate it from the main sentence. And that information is, but I'm not sure she was joking, or I'm sure she was joking. Mary said she had never had a wink for months. As part of afterthoughts, we are commenting that we are not sure she was joking, or we are sure she was joking. So what is in bracket is just a comment or a commentary to the sentence, and we need to separate it appropriately. Then we also have the use of the brackets to enclose cross references. Okay, for instance, you are writing a research or an article, you make mention of crocodile, then you want your reader to refer to an illustration of the crocodile at reptiles, maybe a heading in the passage somewhere. So see illustration at reptile is an extra information that is being given you, so that if you want to do any further looking up on crocodile, then you can go to the section titled reptile. So crocodile, bracket open, see illustration at reptile. A large river reptile with a long tail covered with what? A hard skin. Then Ghana, SIC. Usually this SIC into bracket is provided or used to indicate that this is how I found the spelling or the word in the original. Okay? Sometimes they are wrong spellings, but you are quoting from somebody. You don't want to correct them because you don't know why they put it that way. So Ghana into bracket SIC, and then Ghana into bracket SIC, actually Gold Coast became independent in 1957. Clearly, it was Gold Coast that became independent in 1957 and not Ghana. The name Ghana came after this period. Yes. Or the name Ghana came into existence in 1957. But before 1957, it was Gold Coast that was fighting for independence. So if any author mistakenly, without doing due diligence, decides to say Ghana gained independence or became independent in 1957, you can decide, after stating Ghana, to put into brackets an SIC, indicating that this is what I found in the original, but the truth actually is this. Good. Then you also see that set march is into brackets. Yes, we are also trying to give you cross references. Okay. Then we also use it to show phonetic transcription. Maybe in your third year or so, you may be doing some phonetics and phonology. And when you transcribe words like fool, pig, you use the bracket to indicate the phonetic transcriptions. Now, I want to believe that you can write down some 3 examples to illustrate each of the uses to which we have put the brackets. So we would want to go to the next punctuation marker, which is our colon. Sometimes this colon gets abused, and since there are conventions of the usage, you must pay attention to the rules that exist in the usage of these punctuations. Now, what is the colon? The colon is used to direct attention to what follows it. It is used, first of all, before a long list and often introduced by phrases such as, for example, for instance, as follows, in the following example. Okay, so Nancy went to the market and bought the following items, colon. The colon is technically used to indicate the content of the items. Okay, so just after the colon, you start listing the items that you have mentioned in the items. Okay, some fish, garden eggs, tomatoes, onions, and some oranges. Good. So technically we can say that the colon is used to introduce a list. I bought the following items. Then the colon comes, then you begin listing the items. Again, in a very formal writing, after a main clause where the following statement illustrates or explains the content of that clause. This is the second use in formal writings after a main clause where the statement that follows illustrates or explains the content of the preceding clause. So here, the colon may be replaced by a semicolon or even a full stop. Okay? So you can say, a mighty tree has fallen, colon, my benefactor has passed away. I thank God, colon, my prayers for a job have been answered. So what we are saying is that the main clause and the following statement, the following statement after the main clause explains the content of the main clause. What is the main clause in our examples? For instance, in the first one, a mighty tree has fallen. That is the main clause. The next statement explains or illustrates what we are saying by saying a mighty tree has fallen. So what is the content of that statement? A mighty tree has fallen. The content is introduced by a colon. My benefactor has passed on or away. I thank God. Why are you thanking God? Colon, my prayers for a job have been answered. We can also use the colon to separate hours and then minutes. Sometimes it is minutes or hours, minutes, and then seconds, and sometimes even microseconds. So the lecture begins at 7 o'clock or at 2:30 p.m. So 2:30 is indicative of the fact that we are separating the hour from the minutes. The plane will arrive at 4:45 p.m. 4 hours and then 45 minutes exactly. Now try and then give some examples of each of the three uses of the colon, and let's see how you are faring so far. Are you able to do that? Yeah, try it. Good. So we can also move into the self-assessment, where we are asking you to list 3 uses of the apostrophe. Do you remember? Give 2 examples to support each of the use. We're also asking, what are the 3 uses of the brackets? We just mentioned them. Illustrate each use with 2 examples. Then the colon is used in 3 different ways. What are these? Support your answers with examples. So soon we are at the end of the first session, and we want to move straight into the second, where we are going to pay attention to the comma, still on punctuation marks. By the end of this session, we expect that you'll be able to distinguish between routine uses of the comma and the less routine functions. You should also be able to identify the more versatile uses of the comma as a punctuation mark and then use them to assist the readers to achieve greater comprehension. Some of you teach. Yes, so by learning these conventions, you are able to also help others to get the understanding and apply them appropriately. You should also be able, at the end of this session, to interpret the meaning of the comma in a text. Now, I hope we can proceed. Good. So what is the comma? Sometimes some of us want to sound it comma or comma. It is comma, okay? The comma is used mostly as a versatile punctuation mark in the hands of the skillful writer to achieve different communicative purpose. Skillful writer. You are also a skillful writer, okay? And we use this comma to achieve very different communicative purposes. But in the hands of the less skillful, it is easily abused. In fact, the comma has been abused the most of all punctuation marks. We must use the comma consciously with a lot of care. So we are going to look at some instances of the uses of the comma. These are conventions. 1, the comma is used routinely as a conventional sign in dates to separate the year from that of a date. Okay? For instance, March 7, 1957. I think this is a sensible application. Otherwise, without a comma, it will sound or be seen as March 71, 95/7. It doesn't make sense. So you have to restore a comma to separate the year from the date. And usually the date is the month and the day. Okay. Good. So March 7, 1957. 7th March 1957. Now some of you may have come into contact with dates that read like 7th March without a comma. Yeah, it can also be allowed. And the reason is that you don't have the day coming immediately before the year. Good. But conventionally, we are saying that when you are writing 7th March, separate the day from the year by the restoration of a comma. These are alternative conventions. Okay, either you choose March 7, 1957 or 7th March 1957. Which one have you been using and why? Good. So we can move on to the next. So now what happens when the year is used to stand alone or used as an adjective? For instance, in 1979, the 1979 coup caused a lot of pains to many families in Ghana. In that context, no comma is required. No comma is required here. The 1979 coup caused a lot of pains to many families in Ghana. Obviously, the year does not come with any dates or day and then month. So you don't need any commas at all. Then we can use it in places, okay? The comma separates successively larger geographical landmarks. Accra is in Ghana. Taifa is in Accra. you use the commas to separate these large successive geographical landmarks. So for example, Kaneshie, Accra, then Tamale, Northern Region, Ghana. Okay, Tamale, Northern Region, Ghana. Why? Because Tamale is in the Northern Region and the Northern Region is in Ghana, or is part of Ghana. Accra or Kaneshie is in Accra, so he separates Kaneshie from Accra by restoring a comma. Good. Now you can also say Central Region, Ghana. Yes, has several forts and castles. Good. But you have to observe that Central Region has several forts and castle. Why is there no comma in this sentence? I mean, Central Region has several forts and castle, because Central Region comes alone. It doesn't come with Ghana. There is no larger geographical unit to distinguish Central Region and that larger geographical unit. So don't go and force a comma where there are no provisions for two larger geographical landmarks or more larger geographical landmarks. Ghana is in West Africa, but if you are writing Ghana is my homeland, you don't need to separate Ghana from any other thing with a comma. We use it in places to separate larger geographical units from smaller ones within them. Good. The next use has to do with numerals. The comma is used to separate all numbers except those used for the purpose of identification, like street numbers, years, telephone numbers, codes, serial numbers, into groups of 3 starting from the right. This is just so that we have easy readings and interpretations of these numbers. For example, this is 4.3 blah 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 million. 4,367,448. Maybe dollars. Let's talk about dollars, okay? Good. And then you may have 17,106,211 pounds. Okay, let's give the next one to the CD. 7,000 cedis, 129.75 or 75 Ghana cedis. What we are doing here is separating the various units. Okay, we have millions, we have thousands, we have hundreds, and sometimes we even have tenths. Okay, we use the comma to separate them when we are writing them to make reading accessible and easier. There is a fourth use of the comma, and this happens with inverted names. The comma is used to separate the surname from the other names when they have been inverted. The normal arrangement, for instance, is Grace Kafui Alote, because we call it Grace is first name, Kafui is middle name, Alote is last name. That is the normal arrangement. When we invert it and we want your surname to come first, you need a comma to separate the surname from the rest of the names. So Alote, comma, Grace Kafui. You see that this is how the university lists your names. Okay, but sometimes that's not how you write your names. So for instance, another normal one is Senior Gabriel Kofi Mensah. Obviously, it is saying that Mensah is this person's surname. When we invert it, we have Mensah, comma, Senior Gabriel Kofi. Then the comma can also be used when we have titles and then degrees. We use a comma to separate a title or degree which follows it. For example, Theophilus Aqua, comma, Esquire. Musa Muhammad, comma, PhD. Some people technically don't want to be addressed as doctors, or they don't want to say, I am Dr. Musa Muhammad. They want you to know that they have had a PhD. Okay? Seiram Agbenyo, comma, junior. Yes, there is a senior Seiram Agbenyo. So when we are writing, or even when we are addressing them, we want to distinguish between the junior and then the senior. These are done by the use of the comma. Yet another use, in letters. We use the comma in letters. This is used to follow the salutation and subscription of a letter. Okay? So salutation, dear Tess, comma, dear Mr. Koi, comma, my dear father, comma, these are salutations. Okay, then we can use the comments also in the subscription section. Yours ever, then your name follows. Yours faithfully, your name follows. Yours affectionate son, daughter, okay, or in-law. Good. In American usage, there is a preference for the colon rather than the comma in business and formal letters. So if you come across any letter or writing that states, for instance, dear Mr. Koi, colon, you know that you are dealing or reading an American writing. Good. The second major use of the comma is to separate the items in lists of words, phrases, or even clauses. For example, the carpenter bought a saw, comma, a hammer, comma, a chisel, comma, and a box of nails. You see that the last comma is in brackets. Now, we have talked about the use of the brackets, so you should be able to talk about or explain why the last comma here is in brackets. The bracket indicates optional. Okay, it means that sometimes it is there, sometimes it is not there. Some people, when it is there, they call it the Oxford comma. Okay, good. The garden is full of red, pink, yellow, and white roses. We are separating the red, the pink, the yellow, and the white roses because these are items or things that are listed in the garden. If you attend lectures regularly, comma, submit assignments punctually, and study hard, comma, you will pass your examinations. And this is common sense, right? Everybody knows that. If you attend lectures regularly, comma, submit assignment. Here we are listing clauses, okay? Submit assignment punctually and study hard. You will pass your examinations. Good. The comma is also used after a long subordinate adverbial clause or a long prepositional phrase which precedes the main clause in a sentence. This is sometimes called periodic sentences. Okay? If food crop farmers had not been regularly disappointed by the rains, you see, naturally we pause when we read sentences like this. The pauses are reflections of the commas in writing. If food crop farmers had not been regularly disappointed by the rains, their standard of living would have been quite high. If food crop farmers had not been regularly disappointed by the rains, it's a subordinate adverbial clause. And at the end of that subordinate adverbial clause, conventionally, we need to restore a comma and then proceed to the main clause, which is their standard of living would have been quite high. Here, we have separated a subordinate clause, adverbial subordinate clause, from the main one by the use of the comma. With the cooperation of the junior, senior, and management staff, the company has recorded good turnover. Okay? With the cooperation of the junior, senior, and management staff, this is a prepositional phrase. Why is it a prepositional phrase? It is a prepositional phrase because it begins with a preposition with. And it is a long one. Okay? Good. So there is the need for a separation between that phrase and then the rest of the sentence. Remember that this phrase is adverbial in nature. Okay? Good. Can you write down two similar examples in which you apply the restoration of the comma in sentences that have adverbial subordinate clauses, and then in sentences that have long prepositional phrases? Good. Another use of the comma. The comma is used after a non-finite or verbless clause at the beginning of a sentence. What is a non-finite or verbless clause? Non-finite clauses are clauses that usually don't mark tense. Okay? Good. You have ing in them, but they don't mark tense. And then a verbless clause is a clause that has no verb, no main verb, I should say, in it. So, for example, to make a good class, comma, a student must work hard at all times. Now, to make a good class is a non-finite clause. And this particular example, to make a good class, is the non-finite clause type we refer to as infinitive. Okay? Infinitive. Then you have another one. Having plowed their fields early, comma, the farmers hope to take advantage of the very first rains. Having plowed their fields early is an example of participial non-finite clause. Participial because the clause begins with a verb ending in the ing participle. Okay, good. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. You've heard it times and over. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. This is a verbless clause. It is first of all a clause because it makes complete meaning and it has hidden subjects and verbs. But as it stands, there is no verb in there. When, in, and then Rome, no verb there. Technically, you can say when you are in Rome. We have restored a subject and a verb. Good. That is why we call it a verbless clause. So when in Rome, comma, do as the Romans do. If you take away this comma, you are going to have hard time reading and you are going to have hard time communicating clearly to your readers. Commas punctuation marks, very important. Good. The comma is also used to separate and introduce a transitional word or phrase, such as however, in fact, therefore, for example, etc. Here, most of us refuse, we deny the use of the comma. In fact, without a comma, however, without a comma, therefore, without a comma. For example, then they are continuing the example. No, you need to separate these transitional or introductory phrases, such as however, in fact, therefore, for example, from the rest of the sentence with the use of the comma. So the road to the summit was rough and full of risks, comma, however, comma, the climbers never gave up. The road to the summit was rough and full of risks, comma, however, comma, the climbers never gave up. Now you realize that in the previous example, in the example I just gave, the however comes with two commas. Yes, it is because it is in the middle of the sentence. If it begins the sentence, it will have just one comma. Another example, George earned good salary and made good investments, comma, therefore, comma, he looks forward to comfortable retirement. Another example, indeed, comma, Ajua never expected any obstacles to her marriage. Indeed, comma, the indeed is an introductory or transitional phrase. It needs to be separated from the rest of the sentence. Then you also have, yes, hard work is not always rewarded. Yes, hard work is not always rewarded. Without a comma, the sentence sounds weird. Yes, hard work is not always, no. Yes, hard work is not always rewarded. Another example, in fact, comma, the examination was so difficult that nobody passed. In fact, comma, the examination was so difficult that nobody passed. The comma is also used before and after any structural element that interrupts or intervenes the flow of the sentence. Your sentence must flow. If there are any needed, necessary elements or structures that you need to introduce and they will intervene or interrupt the flow of the sentence, you need to mark them out by the use of the comma. Here are some examples. English has been and will always be a bond of unity for Ghana and Ghanaians. What we are saying is English has been a bond of unity for Ghana and Ghanaians and will always be, it's an intervening or interrupting element or structure. When it happens like this, you need to separate this interrupting structure from the main flow. And when it is in the middle of the sentence, you use two commas. One before it, one after it. Another example, the good harvest, though it has been anticipated, takes everyone by surprise. Technically, the sentence reads, the good harvest takes everyone by surprise. But we need to interrupt the flow of this sentence by adding some afterthought. Sometimes we call it afterthought, though it has been anticipated. Okay, good. Another example, the donation, though late, was thankfully accepted. Yeah, we just want to say that it came late. And it came late has come to interrupt the flow of the sentence. The donation was thankfully accepted. This interrupting phrase must be set off by a pair of commas. Another use, the comma can also be used before and after a non-defining, sometimes also known as non-restrictive relative clause, or a phrase in a position which offers extra information about the noun, which is technically called the antecedent. Good. So these are some examples, okay? Professor Obey, comma, who has just returned from Japan, comma, will attend the matriculation ceremony next Saturday. Professor Obey, comma, who has just returned from Japan, comma, will attend the matriculation ceremony. Who has just returned from Japan has been separated by two commas from the main sentence. Professor Obey will attend the matriculation ceremony next Saturday. Why? Because the who has just returned from Japan is a relative clause, a non-defining, non-restrictive, non-essential relative clause. Without this clause, we can still be able to identify Professor Obey. That's why we call it non-restrictive or non-defining. Good. Cape Coast, another example. Cape Coast, which was once a national capital, is a seat of a great university. You know what the university is? Good. Cape Coast is the seat of a great university. We have introduced which was once a national capital, and this construction does not define Cape Coast. We know there is only one Cape Coast in Ghana, maybe in Africa, or maybe in the world. Okay? So which was once a national capital is a non-essential, non-restrictive, non-defining relative clause. Whenever we have such constructions, we separate the non-restrictive clause from the main part of the sentence. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president. Who does not know that Kwame Nkrumah was the first president of Ghana? When you need to introduce Ghana's first president, we say that it is just non-defining, or it is in apposition with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So we separate the appositive structure, Ghana's first president, from the main name. So Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, set ablaze Africa's liberation from colonial rule. You must note that the defining relative clauses require no commas at all. For instance, the money that was in the wardrobe was stolen. The man who stole the money has been found or caught. That was in the wardrobe defines the money. It's not the one that was in the pocket or the purse. And the man who stole the money has been found, not the one who came looking for the money. Okay? Good. So these are restrictive relative clauses or defining relative clauses. Good. The comma is very occasionally also used to separate two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions are and, or, but, nor, yet, for, especially when the first clause is long. For example, John spent the whole night reading through his notes, comma, yet he has found no question that he can easily answer. That's quite interesting. I mean, it's unfortunate also. John spent the whole night reading through his notes, yet he has found no question that he can easily answer. Another example, the lecturer had taken the student through the new topic with a lot of patience, comma, but they still did not understand the lesson. That is not your portion. You understand the lesson, don't you? Great. Good. So let's look at this other use of the comma. It is used to separate a question tag from the statements of the sentence. So for example, you are my mate, aren't you? Now, you should know that the word A-R-E-N apostrophe T, A-R-E-N apostrophe T is not pronounced aren't, it is aren't. Okay? You are my mate, aren't you? The journey will be long, won't it? The girl likes apples, doesn't she? You aren't afraid of the teacher, are you? We are using the comma to separate the question tag from the main statement of the sentence. In the first example, the main statement is you are my mate. And the question tag is aren't you? We separate aren't you from you are my mate. You understand, don't you? Sure. You'll be able to give examples, won't you? So write down 2 examples to illustrate what we have found or talked about from 2.23 to 2.28. I mean, all that we have spoken about. Then we want to find out whether you'll be able to assess yourself. Write down 2 examples to illustrate the routine uses of the comma. And then the following sentences illustrate different uses of the comma. Insert commas in each of the sentence. Insert commas in each sentence and state the type that is being illustrated. Okay? Good. Then they found the task very difficult. However, they are determined to succeed. We all expect to succeed, don't we? I hope you'll be able to restore the appropriate punctuation markers. Sure. Good. So we should be going into the 3rd session where we are going to look at the punctuation marks that are left. Okay? By the end of this session, we expect that you'll be able to use appropriately such common punctuation marks as the caret, the full stop or the period, the question mark, and the exclamation mark. What is a caret? Yeah, we'll get to know. You should also be able to use correctly such less common punctuation marks such as the dash, the ellipsis, the hyphen, the semicolon, and be able to identify the context for the use of quotation marks, in particular the double quotation marks and the single quotation marks, and then use them appropriately. Now you see the carets. Sometimes you are writing an essay, you forgot a very important word. When you are able to read over, you want to restore that word. You use a caret. That is the caret there. The caret is mainly an editorial mark used to show that something is missing from the text. Okay? The company has no to give you a good credit. That's what you wrote. Then you don't have any space. So when you read over, you realize that you have left a very important word, which is hesitation. You use a caret to indicate that I missed out this word. So the company has no caret, hesitation, to give you a good credit. Then the presence of mother made all the difference to a morale. You have missed out a word, right? If you don't have the space to insert that word, bring a caret and then put the word there. So the presence of her mother made all the difference to her morale. Good, that is for the caret. Now what about a dash? This mark is used more often in informal usage instead of a comma, a colon or a semicolon to make a piece of writing more vivid or more dramatic or both. For example, so you've been deceiving me for years, dash. How can I ever believe you again? So you've been deceiving me for years, dash. How can I ever believe you again? There was a loud clang of metals, comma, smoke and dust rose, comma, and people rushed to the scene, dash. It was chaos. Are you beginning to pick the patterns of the use of the dash? Okay, it looks like the dash is like the colon that we were using, okay, to introduce the contents of what we are talking about. Okay, so there was a loud clang of metals and smoke and dust rose and people rushed to the scene, dash. It was chaos. A bell tolled, the congregation stood bowed, the pallbearers moved in, the casket was lifted, dash. It was solemn. Okay? Good. Now, there's another use of this dash. It is used singly or in pairs, again in informal context, to separate extra information and afterthought or a comment in a vivid or dramatic way from the rest of the sentence. So Gary is the student's companion, dash, or so students say, or so students say. So this dash or this or so students say is an afterthought or a comment. We just want to say that we are not saying it, but every student is saying that Gary is their student companion. Okay. Good. So in informal writing, brackets, or informal writing, rather, brackets or commas replace the dash. So whenever you are using the dash, you know that you are writing in an informal context. Your academic writings, your assignments, your essays, exams, essay questions, you don't need these dashes. You rather go for the brackets or the commas because they indicate more formal tones than the dash. Good. The dash can also be used to separate identification of a quotation when footnotes are not used. For example, the child is the father of the man. Okay? And I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety, dash, westward. This dash indicates that the quotation or what I have cited was said by one scholar or poet called Wordsworth. The child is the father of man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety, dash, Wordsworth. Good. Now we can look at the ellipsis. It is always 3 dots. Ellipsis is not 2 or more. It's not 4. It's not 5. It's not 6. Some of us, our ellipsis begin from Kantamanto to Kaneshi, plenty. From Accra to Kumasi, plenty. The ellipsis is 3. This mark is used mostly with quotations to indicate the omission of material regarded not so essential within a quotation. For example, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who had studied in an American university, set ablaze Ghana's struggle for independence. This is the original. Maybe you don't need all the phrases and words in this quotation. So you can decide, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, do. The reason some of us write it plenty is that we call it do. See, plenty do. But it is only 3 do. So Dr. Kwame Nkrumah set ablaze Ghana's struggle for independence. It tells you that there are some words there, some phrases there, I don't need it, okay? So ellipsis must always maintain the essential meaning of the original quotation, okay? So we have said that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah set ablaze Ghana's struggle for independence. The fact that he studied in an American university is not so essential to what we have said now. Good. Now we can look at the exclamation mark as one of the marks that get abused online in adverts. Okay? It is used at the end of a sentence or a remark that expresses a high degree of strong emotion like anger, joy, or amazement. So when you see announcement, and you have about 1,000 exclamation marks, what are they saying? Are they angry about the announcement, or they are overjoyed, or they are amazed about the announcement? The home crowd yelled, "Go!" See, this "go" comes with some level of excitement. And this exclamation mark is a linguistic expression of that level of excitement. Go! As the ball entered the net. Walk out of my office at once. See, the exclamation sign there will tell you that the walk out of my office wasn't a nice one, wasn't a polite one. Okay? It was one that came with some level of anger. Okay? Good. Wow. What a wonderful surprise. See, the tone can also be down. But then the exclamation sign will still be there to show that there is a level of amazement. Linguistic amazement is marked in the presence of the exclamation mark. Wow, what a wonderful surprise. The young lady exclaimed. All the young ladies, may you be surprised this Val's Day. In fact, the young men too, be so surprised this Val's Day. Wow. What a wonderful surprise. Then you have your exclamation sign. Good. So let's look at a full stop. Very popular. Yes, every sentence, every essay would have at least one. At least one. But you can be sure it will be all through the essay. This is a very common punctuation mark that is used to mark the end of a sentence, which is a statement. We call it a terminal marker because it ends the statement. The young lady looked coyly at the gentleman. The young lady looked coyly at the gentleman. The gentleman watched her coldly. Yes, to show that the sentence has ended, you restore the full stop or the period. Good. The full stop can also or may be used at the end of an abbreviation. We saw this earlier when we were talking about the note-making, note-taking. Do you remember? Okay. A full stop may end an abbreviation or a person's initials. Sometimes the full stop is omitted. Example, Mr. KB Abre or Mr. KB Abre. Example again, PM, prime meridian, P.M. or PM, just without the full stop. The full stop is often omitted when the abbreviation consists of capital letters, as in BBC, UN, UNESCO, ECOWAS, EU, AU, NEPAD, CNN, and what have you. Okay? In these instances, we omit the full stop. Now we can look at the hyphen. Hyphens and dashes are not one and the same. You look at their sizes and you can tell their differences. It is necessary not to confuse a hyphen with a dash. Okay? Now, the dash separates parts of a sentence. Generally, the hyphen is about half of that, the length of the dash. The hyphen is used in 4 different ways as follows. 1, to form compound word form from 2 other words. Okay? So, kind-hearted. You don't need a dash between the kind and hearted. What you put there is a hyphen. Word formation processes or word formation, word hyphen formation. Sea green, sea hyphen green. Far-fetched, far hyphen fetched. Baby sit, baby hyphen sit. Okay? Now, you can also use the hyphen to form a compound word from a prefix and then a noun. Anti-America or anti-America. If you are American, you say anti-America. If you are British, anti-America. Pro-Israel or Israeli. Okay? So pro-Israel or Israeli. Pre-independence, pre-school, etc. Use the hyphen in the compound word from a prefix and then a noun. The prefixes are the ones beginning, the anti, the pro, and the pre in pre-independence and pre-school. You also use the hyphen form to form a compound word from 2 other words which are separated by a preposition. More popular examples: father-in-law, out of date, mother-to-be, officer in charge, or caretaker with charge, or catechist in charge, okay, etc. Good. Sometimes too, we use it to separate a prefix ending in a vowel from a word beginning with that same vowel. So if you have co and ordinate in coordinate, or re and elect in re-elect, pre and eminent in preeminent, pre and empt in preempt, you separate the prefixes that end in the same vowel as the words they are attached to. Good. Now, some of you have names that are hyphenated. I don't think you write your names with dashes. You call it hyphenated names. Okay? Good. Or compound names. Now, let's look at the question mark. That is the commonest use. The commonest use of this mark is to end a direct question. Okay? Very common. It's a terminal marker. It ends a direct question. What's your name? What is your business here? Where do you come from? Where do you live? What are you doing here? Are you listening to me? Can you hear me? These are sentences that solicit missing information, and we end them by restoring a question mark. We call them also terminal markers. Note that it is never used in an indirect question, as in, he asked what my name was. He inquired where I lived. These do not directly ask questions. They rather report what question someone asked them. So you don't need a terminal marker, or you don't need a question mark. A less common use is when a statement is supposed to be interpreted as a question. You are the first to arrive. He pays his rent regularly. Yeah. You want to be emphatic on the information you have received, or you want to be sure. Okay? So, he pays his rent regularly. Structurally, this is supposed to be a statement. He pays his rent regularly, but you want to convert it into a question to be sure that what you have said is true. Okay. Good. The other use is sometimes used in brackets to express doubts. Ghana became independent in 1956. You are not sure. Okay? So you put into bracket a comma just after 1956 to indicate to your reader that you are not so sure about the date you have stated. Okay? So Ghana became independent in 1956, into bracket, comma, and became a republic in 1960. Okay? She was born in 1914, into bracket, comma, and died in 1974. The brackets, the comma, the question mark in the bracket is indicative of the fact that the writer is not sure about the date of birth of the person he's talking about. This doesn't mean that when you are writing exams, you can give figures and put them into question mark into brackets. Because in exams, we are expecting facts, not guesses. Do you understand? Beautiful. Good. So we can move on to look at the quotation marks, or what sometimes we refer to as inverted commas. Okay? Quotation marks may be either double, as you can see, or single. Which ones do you prefer? Okay? Double quotation marks, these are normally used to enclose the actual words of a speaker. For example, she replied, "That's your worry." That is what she said. That's your worry. Okay? Grace, her mother said, "You can't do that." So the mother said, "Grace, you can't do that." Then we have, "Where is your teacher?" The head teacher asked, "Where is your teacher?" The direct words of the head teacher is, "Where is your teacher?" In these instances, we use the double quotation marks. We also use it to identify words which are being discussed. Okay? Words that are being discussed as words. The word flame comes from the French or the French language. The word conflagration comes from Latin. So we are talking now about roots of words. While flame comes from French, conflagration comes from Latin. So we are here indicating that these words are not being used as normal. I mean, we are making references to them. So we restore double quotation marks. Again, we use it to enclose titles of short stories, poems, and songs, but not books. Okay? We use it to enclose the titles of short stories, poems, and songs, but not books. Lawrence's "The Woman Who Rode Away" is a heart-rendering short story. Have you read Wordsworth's The Excursion? So, "The Woman Who Rode Away" is a short story. The Excursion is also another. Have you ever listened to Handel's The Messiah? The Messiah is a song, right? Good. So we are marking it as a song with a quotation or double quotation marks. Again, another instance, in bibliography. Bibliography is a listing of books consulted, read ever before in a writing. A book that you have read, all books you have read, but maybe not quoted or sometimes quoted. These are the bibliography. We use it in bibliography to distinguish the title of a selection or an article from that of the whole book in which the selection or article is printed. For example, Wordsworth, William, Ode to Duty, comma, selected poems, Cambridge University Press, 1922. Okay, so Ode to Duty is quoted, double quotation. Selected poems, CUP 1922, Bamboshe, Ayo, non-native Englishes. So Bamboshe is another bibliography. Bamboshe, Ayo, non-native Englishes on trial, English in Ghana. So what it means is that Bamboshe wrote an article or wrote a piece titled Non-Native Englishes on Trial, and it can be found in a book called English in Ghana. And Ode to Duty is also Williams Wordsworth's piece, which is found in Selected Poems. So the entire title of the book is Selected Poems, but there is a section written by Wordsworth which is called Ode to Duty. That is what we are talking about here. Then we come to the single quotation marks. Okay, the single quotation marks are used to mark quotations which are within other quotations. This is very logical. When you have quotations within quotations, use the single quotations to separate or to indicate that these are quotations within quotations. So John asked me, did the lecturer say the lecture is cancelled or postponed? Did the lecturer say the lecture is cancelled or postponed? The teacher told us Milton wrote many great poems, including Paradise Lost. What the teacher said includes a title or the title of a poem, and you need to show that it is a title of a poem. So while you restore double quotation for what the teacher said, use single quotation to indicate the title of the poem within the teacher's quotation. Okay? Good. Now the semicolon. Semicolon means it's not a full colon. You realize how we wrote the colon? 2 dots. This one is not a full colon. It's a semicolon. In his writer's guide and index, Porter Perrin observed that a semicolon is used to mark a degree of separation between a sentence element or sentence elements considerably greater than that marked by a comma, nearly as great as that marked by a period. The semicolon is used to separate main clauses which are related or dependent in thoughts. Okay? So for example, to err is human, to forgive, divine. Now this semicolon here indicates that the two parts of the sentence are related, okay, through some dependency, sometimes through addition of information, sometimes through consequences. So to err is human, to forgive, divine. Swimming is an acquired skill. It has to be learned. Swimming is an acquired skill. It has to be learned. Swimming is an acquired skill. It's related to, can also be used to mark off separate statements which are internally punctuated with commas. Okay? We are sending you the following goods by afternoon coach tomorrow. The list begins. Suiting materials, comma, 5 bills, semicolon. Woolen pullovers, comma, 4 dozens, semicolon. And nylon stockings, comma, 100 pairs. How many items do you think have been listed here? Without the use of the colon or semicolon, you may think that there are how many? 1, suiting materials, 5 bills, woolen pullovers, 4 dozens, and nylon stockings, and 100 pairs. There may be 7 items there. But the restoration of the semicolon tells you that we are saying suiting materials, 5 bills of suiting materials, 4 dozens of woolen pullovers, and 100 pairs of nylon stockings. That is a very logical use of the semicolon. We have 2 points to consider. First, transport. Second, the expense. Okay? Transport. Second, the expense. Now we are only listing 2 points, not 4 or 5. That is why there is a need for the restoration of the semicolon. The semicolon here tells you that first and transport are related, and it is 1. Then second and the expense also related, it is also 1, so there are only 2. Good. Now, what are the routine uses of the full stop? Are you able to tell? We talked about the full stop. Can you write a short essay on the use of the quotation marks? Remember, we mentioned 2 types, and we have given instances of how both are used, the double and then the single. Are you also able to punctuate the passage below? Yes, I think you should have some time to look at it and then punctuate it. Now, we would want to look at session 4, where we pay attention to prepositions. Okay? By the end of this session, you should be able to state 4 uses of the preposition. You should be able to choose the right preposition to combine with particular verbs, nouns, adjectives, and then adverbs. Then you should be able to avoid redundant use of prepositions. There are times we don't need a preposition, but people by force want to put a preposition there. You should be able to avoid wrong omission of prepositions when the sentence requires them. Sometimes there is need for the preposition. People don't want to bring it. See, by the time this session is over, you should be able to tell when you need one, when you don't need one. Good, so I think we can proceed. Good. So what is a preposition? A preposition generally shows the relationship of a noun or a noun equivalent to the rest of the sentence. It shows relationship of location, of position, okay, of a noun or a noun phrase or noun equivalent to the rest of the sentence. For example, at, for, in, on, beside, under, to, before, of, from, towards, etc. The problem of the list above is that these same forms may function as other parts of speech, particularly adverbs. Yes, that is the slippery nature of the English language words. This implies that if it is the particular context that tells us whether a particular form is a preposition or not a preposition. Here are some examples. The hat is on the table. Here we are relating the hat to the table by position. He put on a hat. He put on a hat. Here we are not relating he to hat by position. We are just saying that he put the hat on. Okay? So the on here is understood to be an adverb and not a preposition. The delegation arrived at noon. The delegation arrived at noon. So here we have a prepositional phrase, at noon. So definitely the at is a preposition. But the assailant came at me with blows. At here is an adverb. Okay. One simple way to tell whether an item is a preposition or not is to test whether the item is stressed in context. Prepositions as minor word class are not generally stressed. With this as a guide, we can realize that on and at in the sentences 1 and 3 are prepositions, while the same in 2 and 4 are adverbs. Okay? It doesn't mean that you can decide to stress the prepositional one and then unstress the adverb one. Okay? Good. So prepositions are used, one, to answer questions where. Okay, where is the cat? It sat on, near, beside, under the table. Okay, it can also answer the question when. When did they arrive? They arrived at, before, after, 8 o'clock. Okay, good. You can also use it to express direction. My mother drove from towards Accra. That's direction. You can use it to express possession. This is a gift for of grace. Okay? Gift for of grace. Then you can use the preposition in set combinations with, for instance, verbs. He said it by mistake. He said it by mistake. Okay? He or we did it on purpose. We are combining these verbs with the prepositions. Doing, saying, and then they arrive by train, arriving by train. They arrive by train or by air or on foot. Here, what we are doing is that we have set the prepositions in combinations with verbs. We can also combine them with nouns. We did it in support of our mate. In support. The word support is a noun. In support of our mates. Children show fondness for pets. Fondness is a noun for pets. So the for and fondness are the combination set or the set combination. Most adults show a dislike of snakes, but take a dislike to their noisy neighbors. Most adults show a dislike of. Dislike is a noun. Of is a preposition. Okay? And then, but take a dislike to their noisy neighbors. Dislike here is also a noun, and it goes with the preposition to. Good. It can also be said together or combined with adjectives. Women are fond of children. Women are fond of children. Not are found, it's fond. Women are fond of children. Fond here is an adjective, working with the preposition of. He is averse to hard work. That's not nice at all. He's averse to hard work. So averse here is an adjective. To is our preposition. This means that he's disinclined, not inclined towards hard work. Well, it can be the case. Her family is averse from taking action. They don't want to take action. Averse is the adjective. From is the preposition. She's angry with herself. Angry is the adjective. With is the preposition. Good. I hope you are able to give some more examples of this combination. Now, it can also be paired with adverbs. We learn to put up with his tantrums. We learn to put up with his tantrums. Always throwing tantrums. We have learned to put up with his tantrums. Put up, or the up is the adverb, and the with is the prepositions. Obviously, you cannot say you have two prepositions following one after the other in this sentence. One is preposition, one is adverb. Up is the adverb, with is the preposition. They drove away from Accra towards Nsawam. they drove away from Accra towards Insaom. Now, away is the adverb. From is the preposition. Okay? She rose early from bed to meet her husband. She rose early from bed to meet her husband. Early is the adverb. From is the preposition. Early from bed. Can you stand up for me in times of trouble? Can you stand up for me in times of trouble? Up here is our adverb, and the for is the preposition. So that is the adverb preposition combination. Now, from A to D above, it is clear that we must learn to choose the right preposition that goes with a word or a particular construction. And here are a few examples to illustrate this point. You act in support of and not for someone. You act in support of and not for someone. And seek revenge on, not for that someone. Okay? You act in support. Because the word support is a noun. Okay? And the word revenge is also a noun. Again, you are fond of children, but we generally speak of a fondness for them. You are fond of children, but we generally speak of a fondness for them. So while fondness work with for, fun go with of. We often act in view of new information, but with a view to maximizing profits. We often act in view of, but with a view to. Okay? It is appropriate that we get to know these things and use the prepositions appropriately. The police often charge suspects with murder after the suspect has been arrested on charge of murder. Okay? With murder and then on a charge of murder. You have to conform to or with the customs of your society. This means you observe the customs. So we conform to or with. Then again, one may admit or admit to an offense. You can admit an offense or admit to an offense. This means that one has confessed it. He admits stealing the money or he admits to stealing the money. Both are correct and acceptable usage. He has been congratulated on or for his success. Congratulate on or for success. If you connive with a person to steal, you have connived at wrongdoing, not with wrongdoing. Connived at. The program comprises 4 courses. This means it consists of or it is composed of 4 courses. What it tells you here is that comprises does not take a preposition. You have been saying it comprises of. Consist takes the preposition of. Compose take the preposition of. Comprise does not take a preposition. Good. So, wrong choice of prepositions. There are instances where we choose wrong prepositions for no apparent reason. We don't know why, but we often find ourselves choosing wrong prepositions. Some particular verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs combine with particular prepositions. And when we are in any doubt as to what preposition accompanies a particular word, we have to consult our dictionaries. And once consulted, forever known. Good. So we often agree with a person, but agree to a suggestion or a proposition. We agree with a person and agree to suggestions or propositions. You may be filled or struck with dismay, fear, or discouragement. Filled with dismay or fear or discouragement. He looked at me in dismay. Okay, you can be filled with dismay or be looked at in dismay or disbelief. One is disgusted at an action or with a person or by a person or an action. But things are familiar to people, but people are familiar with them. Things are familiar to people. Is it familiar to you? But people are familiar with those things. So you can ask, is reading familiar to you? Is reading from the left familiar to you, or are you familiar with reading from the left? If you are possessed of great ability, you have or you own it. If you are possessed of great ability, you have that ability or you own it. But if you are possessed with an idea, you are controlled or dominated by it. Okay? So for example, John is possessed of great natural ability or great strength. The old lady is possessed or by the idea that she is disliked. Good. My father forbids me to go to the dance, but he may also prevent me from going there. My father forbids me to go to the dance, but he may also prevent me from going there. Okay, so forbids does not take preposition, but prevents can take it. Okay, good. So a person may die of an illness, grief, or hunger, but a person may also die from a wound or die through neglect. So the verb or the word die has the potential of working with of, working with from, or working with through. It depends on what you are saying. Someone may die in harness, okay, but injustice dies hard. Okay, no preposition. There is a close affinity between Ga and Dangbe, but a person feels a strong affinity to or for another. So the same word affinity can decide on or work with different prepositions depending on what you are communicating. There is a close affinity between Ga and Dangbe, but a person feels a strong affinity to or for another. Then we also have this instance of redundant prepositions. The word does not need a preposition, but users are making it by force. They are bringing the preposition there. Note that some words don't take prepositions. They don't take prepositions. And very often the error is the result of a false analogy. So you may highlight a point, but you throw light or you throw light on or upon that point. Okay? You may highlight a point. So the word highlight in this sense does not take a preposition, but you can throw light on the point or upon that point. Things comprise, not comprise of. They may consist of, but not comprise of. Okay? However, someone may emphasize a point. Emphasize a point, but may lay emphasis on that point. You see? So emphasize does not take a preposition, but when you add lay emphasis, then the preposition on comes in. Okay? So emphasize, you have to realize that the words that do not take the preposition are mostly verbs. So you may highlight a point, but you throw light, and the light is a noun, okay? In this last one, emphasize and emphasis. Emphasize is a verb, so it doesn't take a preposition, but emphasis is a noun, okay? So it takes the preposition. Remember that we have connected nouns to prepositions. You vacate a room, and vacate here is a verb. You vacate a room, not from it. So there is no need for a preposition, but you can withdraw from it. There's an exception, but you can withdraw from it. Withdraw is here also a verb, but as an exception, it can work with a pronoun, a preposition, I should say. You suffer if you fail to pay tax, but you may suffer from a toothache or a headache. Okay, so you suffer a penalty, no preposition, but we can also say you may suffer from a toothache or a headache. It is good to voice an opinion. It is good to voice an opinion. To voice means to speak out. So you don't need the out in voice. Okay? Don't say it is good to voice out. You say it is good to voice your opinion. You may also say speak out your opinion or your mind. Speak out your mind. Out here is an adverb, not a preposition. Good. So you can also generally discuss a matter. We discuss the issue at a meeting, not discussed on the issue. But you can also hold discussions on. Okay, so here, discussions is a noun, discuss is a verb. The noun one takes the preposition on. His attempt to win was vain, not in vain. His attempt to win was vain. But you can also say, has the driver been yet? Has the driver been yet? Not been to. But I haven't been to Akosombo. You can say, I haven't been to Akosombo. It means you haven't gone there before. Good. There are times we also need to omit the prepositions. Okay? It is unacceptable to omit a preposition when the context requires it. But let's look at these examples. That boy is fond telling lies. That boy is fond telling lies. It means we have omitted a preposition. That boy is fond of telling lies. Be careful what you say. We often hear that, be careful what you say. We can say, be careful about, or be careful of what you say. Some policemen collude armed robbers. That's what sometimes we say. We should say some policemen collude with armed robbers. Kofi is apt picking up a new subject. Kofi is apt at picking up a new subject. My sister claims becoming a doctor, or aims becoming a doctor. We have omitted the at, right? My sister aims at becoming a doctor. He is much aggrieved his loss. There is something omitted, a preposition. He is much aggrieved at or over his loss. She is adroit solving interpersonal problems. That's an omission there. She's adroit at or in solving interpersonal problems. So what we have been talking about in this last bits of this session is instances where there is need for prepositions, but we ignore them. And instances where there is no need, but we still bring them. And I want to believe that at this session, you can take a self-assessment. Can you state 4 uses of prepositions and illustrate each with 2 examples or just an example? Then can you identify prepositions in the short passage that is below? Okay, can you comment on the appropriateness of each? Can you write out the correct form or the wrong ones? Can you write out the correct forms of these prepositions that are wrongly used? Yes, so this is a passage, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to answer them correctly. I think that because technically we could not start early, we will not be able to finish all the 6 sessions today, because you'll be preparing for another lesson. So I think we can end it here at session 4. When we meet again next week, God willing, we briefly take the 2 other sessions, and then we can continue with the next units. I hope you have learned a lot. As we started, we mentioned that the unit talks about the conventions of usage. And these are the things that constitute mechanical accuracy when we write our essays. Mostly, students, when you give 5 marks for mechanical accuracy, students will score 0 because their mechanics are not mechanizing. Their handling of punctuation is weak. Their handling of prepositions is weak. These are the grammar bits of the language, and you need to pay attention, serious attention to these units and revise. Ask questions if you have them. When you are in doubt, consult so that these usages become conventional also to you. Thank you so much for joining us today for this unit. I'm sure we'll meet again if God gives us life. Enjoy the day.